In this session today, we have the distinct honor of hearing from 5 veterans of what when I teach my military history classes, I like to characterize as the most difficult thing a military can do: an assault against defended beaches. America did a lot of these actions in World War II, notably in Normandy, in the European theater, and of course so many times in the Pacific theater. These gentlemen are here to offer us their wisdom today, though each one of them could easily speak for an hour upon the heroic tales that they lived through and the great deeds that they did. Sadly enough, to keep to our time period, only about 10 or 12 minutes, each veteran is going to have a chance to tell you their tale today. And then that'll hopefully leave us time for questions and answers. So without any further ado, I will get to our first veteran, General Gordon Gale. Brigadier General Gordon D. Gale, United States Marine Corps retired, graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in June 1939, and was commissioned a Marine Second Lieutenant. After completing basic school in Philadelphia in 1940, he was assigned to the 5th Marines, 1st Marine Division, in which he served in 3 Pacific campaigns: Guadalcanal, where he was part of the initial invasion on August 7, 1942; New Britain, December 29, 1943, where he earned the Bronze Star for his actions at Telesia in New Britain; Cape Gloucester and Pavanue, Russell Islands in June 1944, and at Peleliu in September 1944, where he was wounded. For his extraordinary heroism while commanding the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines on Peleliu, he was awarded the Navy Cross. He returned to 1st Marine Division in the Korean War to serve as the 1st Executive Officer of the 7th Marines, then as the G3 on the division staff. He's a graduate of the Army Command and General Staff College. In 1963 to 65, he chaired the long-range study panel at Quantico, developing concepts for the Corps' operational, organizational, logistical, and R&D needs. He was promoted to Brigadier General in 1964, retiring in 1968. He then joined the Georgetown University's Center for Strategic and International Studies. I give you General Gordon Gale.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Basically, they ask us to sit down, but I spent a long time as an instructor in our staff colleges, and I always had to talk to the class standing up, and I can't get out of the habit. Secondly, I'd like to establish my relationship with you as being somewhat different from all the veterans that you're here to honor and thank and learn from. I never considered myself a veteran. I was a mercenary. Your tax money sent me to the Naval Academy. The timing was that when I got out of there, we were ready to go to war, and so I had a real good war. And then I stayed in the service, and I was a mercenary for the rest of my life until I retired from the Marine Corps. So in that sense, I'm not an honest veteran. In Korea, there was a Marine colonel who later became quite famous. During a period when people were talking about what are we fighting for, mom's apple pie or blueberry pie or religion or home and hearth or what, and one of the reporters got up to this fellow and said, "Colonel, what are you fighting for?" And he spit a little tobacco juice and he said, $875 a month. I appreciate being called a veteran and treated like a veteran, but I'm not really. The thing that I was asked to talk about here were assault landings, and I was in a few. The first one at Guadalcanal was, of course, my first operation. It was the first for almost everybody that was in it. And we were all scared stiff going into it, at least I was, and I thought most people were. Worried most about how we would act, not about the danger to us, but whether or not we would face up to what we had to do. And at the time, I was a captain, a new captain, battalion operations officer in one of the 2 battalions that made the initial landing at Guadalcanal, and we expected a bloody mess, and we got ready for it, and we fired all the gunfire that we could command, and we ran all the planes along the beach to shoot down all the Japanese that were there, and got in our boats. And just as I got off of the transport to climb down the net, I went up to the bridge and got the navigator, and I said, "Now show me where the beach is we're going to land on." And he pointed out a beach, and I made a very careful note of where it was. It wasn't my job to get us there, but I was a control freak, so I wanted to know about it. And I climbed down the net and got into the boat, and we went to an entirely different area. I couldn't do anything about it because the Navy was responsible to get us to the right beach, and they did. And when we finally got to the right beach, I was there about 20 minutes after the first wave. We were totally surprised there wasn't any resistance. And my main memory of that landing was how funny a coconut tree looks when it's been splatted by a naval gun shell, and you just see all this orange, spongy material, and it was all over the place. And we landed, and we went on in to a river that we had to cross, not a river, a stream. Got across that, moved along, never found a Japanese the first day. That was a great relief. The fact was that the Japanese didn't have enough military troops on Guadalcanal to defend very well. So they ran away, which was very wise of them. Across the way from us, on the island of Tulagi and Gavutu and Tanambogo, there was serious opposition, and our people who landed there had a hard fight. Wasn't any question about the outcome. They knew what a defended beach felt like. I still didn't know. The Guadalcanal operation turned into what not many people understand was a protracted naval campaign. Our two navies argued over who owned it. They owned it at night, we owned it in the daytime. That campaign went on for 4 months, a fair amount of fighting, a lot more than I saw. I just happened to be in a battalion that didn't get into too much of the fighting, some. And then we went back to Australia in December and got ready for the next campaign. And that was on the island of New Britain at a place called Cape Gloucester. And there, again, the Japanese were defending a rather large area with too few troops from their perspective. And we made a landing which had opposition, but nothing very significant or nothing that slowed us down. I was not in the initial landing. I was in a battalion that followed on behind. And we very quickly drove them, any of them who were in there, away, and then got over to the airfield, which was the real name of the game. We drove them away from the airfield and captured it, at which point our principal mission had been covered. So then we started along the north coast of New Britain toward Rabaul, 120 miles, no, about 200 miles away. And we went along the coast, making landings, usually without any opposition. The people we'd find ashore were largely stragglers because their main forces had been defeated when we seized the airfield. But then we had to go to a place called Talasea, where there was a very narrow beach. No water, well, twice as wide as this, maybe 3 times as wide as this room here. They had a very few troops, but they defended well against it, and they had it thoroughly registered, and so they were plopping mortars and artillery in there as we landed. We landed in boats. We had to put a man at the top of each boat to look ahead and signal to the coxswain, don't hit that underwater obstacle, go over here. And that was going on as we landed, with occasional shells dropping in on either side. And when we got ashore, there was the dangerous point, because they had the beach all registered, and they kept plopping in on that and killed a lot of Marines and wounded a lot of Marines. My job was to land behind the assault wave, my battalion's job, and push on through. Well, in pushing on through, I had to find out where those people were that were dropping the mortars on our people, and did find them and did push them away, and learned something that we had never known about the Japanese before. If you left them a retreat option, they would take it. Now, we hadn't experienced that on Guadalcanal. But there, I went at them with 2 arms, one to push them to the front and one to go around their flank. And we turned them out of every position they were in. They didn't fight very hard. They fought some. We had some casualties, but basically we just turned them out of everything till we captured our objective. To me, that was a great lesson, to learn that they would retreat if you gave them a chance. The dangerous thing was to encircle them. But that was the nature of that particular landing. After that campaign was over, we went back to the Russell Islands to a camp and trained and got more people. We were always getting more people and sending the veterans home and sending the unfit home and training the new people with new leadership up to getting ready for the next landing. That was our repetitive job during the war. Then we went to Peleliu, and by this time, the Japanese Imperial Headquarters in Tokyo had learned a very important lesson, which they didn't know at first. They thought that their Bushido Banzai spirit would overcome our machine guns. It took them a long time to learn that wasn't true. Now, it was really exciting to us when they were practicing those tactics, but it was cheap because we had interlocking bands of fire when they attacked our positions, and we mowed them down. Well, that's a cheap way to win a fight. When they get in the hole and stay there, make you come dig them out, that's an expensive way. And that's what they did at Peleliu. And they did it because Tojo, back in Tokyo, had said, our methods aren't working. We've got to change our methods. We've got to get our tactics in line with our strategy. The Japanese strategy for the war in the Pacific was to seize as far out as they could, hold it, and bleed us to a settled accommodation. They expected to do that. But their tactics, their Bushido tactics, were not consistent with that. They'd thrown away a lot of their forces by attacking us when they shouldn't have. But for Peleliu, they didn't do that. They said, we're going to come here, and their mission was to defend the island and to sell it at the highest possible cost. And they did. When we landed there, they were all ready, they were fortified, they had interlocking bands of fire, they had artillery coming in on the beach where we were landing, and then there was another trench inland from there where our people naturally took refuge, in which they naturally had registered, and where we suffered a lot of casualties. We had to push across past that, take the high ground, which was a bloody 5 days, and there was where Colonel Louis Puller with the 1st Regiment fought a regiment down in 4 or 5 days, down to zero, almost zero combat capability, but they took the high ground. They did what we had to do. Then we fought on for a month and a half or 2 months, largely because our command did not recognize that the situation had changed from an assault situation to a siege situation. In a siege, take it slow, you reconnoiter the enemy, you find out where the targets are, you knock them out with everything you've got, and then you go after them. A lot of our people were a little slow learning that. My regiment, in which I was a unit of 1/3, learned it early, we did it right, and we went a lot of places where other people couldn't go by simply not charging ahead. That's all I need to talk about beach landings, unless you've got something more.
Thank you, General. Our second speaker today, it's a unique personal pleasure for me to introduce, because he doesn't know this, but I informed him of this just a few minutes ago. I've known him for years, though he didn't know that. One of the great crosses I have to bear in my job is that I get to take students to the Normandy battlefields each summer. We spend 4 days tramping the battlefields of Normandy, trying to recapture a bit of the history of World War II. And if you've ever been to Normandy, golly, one of the places you have to go, maybe the most visually inspiring place, is Point du Hoc, where the shell craters are still there. As I began to learn more about how to give battlefield tours, I came and got a book from this place by a guy named Ronald Drez called The Voices of D-Day. And when we go there now, we stand where these soldiers, it's a collection of oral histories, then we go and stand where these soldiers did their actions, and the students get to read that book and pretend like they're taking on the guise of that soldier. And the one story that we always tell at Pointe du Hoc is the story of Bud Lummel. So every summer I stand in shell holes at Pointe du Hoc and we read his story, and now I get a chance to meet him and hear it personally. Leonard Bud Lummel was one of the highest decorated Rangers of World War II. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions at Pointe du Hoc, Normandy on D-Day. First Lieutenant Lummel single-handedly destroyed the German gun battery of 5 155mm artillery pieces, saving untold thousands of lives. There he suffered a bullet wound. 6 months after the Normandy campaign, he fought to take and hold Hill 400, also called Castle Hill, in Germany's Hürtgen Forest, where he was wounded twice. Only 15 of the 65 members of Lummel's D Company Rangers left Hill 400 without assistance. I give you Leonard Bud Lummel.
Thank you very much. I hope you'll excuse me for not standing as the general did, but on the other hand, I'm a hell of a lot older than he is, and I don't mind if he sits down.
Not true.
Okay? Well, the Rangers' mission on D-Day was to destroy the big 155mm coastal guns of Pointe du Hoc on the west side of Omaha Beach, Normandy, France, as early as possible on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and save thousands of lives. Those big guns had the most firepower in Hitler's defensive Atlantic Wall. They had to be found, destroyed as quickly as possible for the invasion to be a success. Unfortunately, the Army Air Corps and the Navy battleships' 14-inch guns had failed to destroy the big guns at Pointe du Hoc. According to World War II historians, they had missed their German targets by 3 miles. The Rangers had to find those big guns, rendering them inoperable by 8:30 in the morning or sooner, early D-Day morning. Thank God they did. Those thousands of lives were in fact saved by the Rangers on D-Day, June 6, 1944. June 6, 1944, D-Day, I was a first sergeant of Company D of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, U.S. Army, acting as a platoon leader of the 2nd Platoon. One of our officers was reassigned to battalion headquarters a few days before D-Day on special duty. We landed at 7:10 a.m. at Pointe du Hoc at the base of the 100-foot high cliffs on the west end of Omaha Beach in Normandy, France on D-Day, June 6, 1944. Picture, if you will, a 10 or 12-story skyscraper, apartment building or hotel downtown, and you'll have an idea of how far we had to go hand over hand up to the top of the cliffs. After a stormy 2.5-hour trip in our British landing craft, we were landed by the British Navy, and they had small landing crafts. We went through cold rain and high seas, during which 2 other D Company LCAs, landing craft assaults, of my company, 2 of the 3 boats sunk right there in the channel. We were constantly under heavy German fire from the cliff tops along the way. We Rangers finally fired our grappling hook with a rope attached up over the 100-foot cliffs of Pointe du Hoc when the landing craft's ramps were lowered and we were about to land. We then climbed the ropes up the cliffs and captured the great fortress known as Pointe du Hoc. I might interrupt here and say there was only 22 of us, 22 Rangers in my platoon. And we did go up the cliffs and capture the fortress in Normandy. These big 6-inch coastal artillery guns had a firing range of 10 to 12 miles and could reach all Allied beaches and the invasion armada of thousands of ships moored off the coast of Normandy early D-Day morning. The early capture of the big coastal guns at Pointe du Hoc permitted the invasion fleet to come closer to shore and unload men and equipment more quickly and safely. Shot through my right side as I led the men ashore, I suddenly disappeared in water over my head as I stepped off the ramp into an underwater bomb crater that I could not see because it was underwater. I came out of the water cold and wet, my right side hurting, with my arm still full of combat gear. With the help of my men, we hurriedly headed for the nearest rope, and up we went as fast as we could climb. The Germans were waiting for us on top of the cliffs. They were waiting to cut our ropes, drop grenades on us, and shoot us while we were climbing the rope up to the cliffs. We could not shoot back or defend ourselves very well as we were climbing this 1-inch plus or minus rope. We were seriously outnumbered, but nevertheless we did prevail. There had been 22 of us from D Company in our British LCA, and we're all up the cliffs within 15 minutes, rushing through the German small arms fire as quickly as we could to the 3 big gun emplacements that were our original assigned objective on the point. They were each believed to contain a large 155 millimeter 6-inch coastal artillery gun. We continued to have more combat with the enemy as we moved from bomb crater to bomb crater. We got to the objective in a matter of minutes. After the assault, but only 3 big German guns assigned to D Company, they weren't there where they were supposed to be. To our shock, disappointment, and anger, there were no big guns anywhere on the point that we could see. Only telephone poles painted black sticking out of the bombed out encasements. We had only aerial photographs and Army intelligence info to study in preparation for this Ranger mission. But this time we were taking lots of mortar and heavy, or by this time we were taking lots of mortar and heavy artillery fire. We moved out quickly, hoping to locate the missing guns, thinking we'd hear them firing from an alternate position, then find and destroy them as quickly as we could, but that didn't happen. When we reached the shore, Blacktop Road, which is about a half a mile in, there's a blacktop roadway along the coast there, about a half mile in. I had only a dozen men left of my original 22 men to get to that road and set up a roadblock, as we were ordered to create, to prevent the German soldiers from going to and from Utah and Omaha Beach to help one another. All German communications were then destroyed by Sergeant Harvey Koenig of D Company. Some Rangers were lightly wounded but able to fight on. 10 of the original 22 Rangers in my boat had been killed or were very, very badly wounded. We were surrounded and greatly outnumbered by the German troops in broad daylight, about 8 a.m. Fortunately, the Germans had no idea that Sergeant Jack Hume and I were so deeply in their midst behind the second line of defense inland. Staff Sergeant Jack Kuhn, my acting platoon sergeant of my platoon, and I, early as possible, started looking for the missing big guns to Point de Hoc by leapfrogging down this sunken road, a farm road, heading inland, following the wagon tracks between the 9 feet high hedgerows of Normandy with trees on the top of these hedgerows, not knowing where it was going. To our surprise, it led to the missing big guns in a large apple orchard, a swale. It was then about 8 a.m. Looking over the hedgerows, I saw 5 big 155 millimeter 6-inch coastal artillery guns and their ammunition and powder bags neatly emplaced, aimed at Utah Beach, ready to fire. They could be turned around easily and fired on Omaha Beach or at the invasion armada or flotilla. Their barrels, or their tubes, were over my head, and the 5 big guns were months before relocated in this new location, a little over a mile from where we had landed, and the big guns were supposed to be located originally. About 100 yards away, a German officer was talking to about 75 men that we believed to be his gun crews. No one was guarding the big guns themselves at that moment that I could see, so I told Jack Kuhn, my sergeant, to cover me from atop the nearest hedgerows. Remember, hedgerows in Normandy are not like they are here. They're at least 9 feet tall with 50-foot trees out of the top of them. They've been gathering stones and roots and everything for hundreds of years, and that's why hedgerows in Normandy is a whole new concept of hedgerows. I told Jack to cover me, and he did. E Company, there hadn't been any firing orders coming back from the point out there where the observation platform was, because E Company of my battalion had captured the point, so the Germans could not get firing orders back to where I was with the gunners. And I knew that. But I didn't know whether or not they may not have had patrols out seeking a new advantageous position for another observation post where their officers could send back firing orders to the guns position and the guns, because the entire firing crew was there ready to go if they just had firing orders to fire from. Between us, we had 2 thermite grenades between Jack Kuhn and I. He had one grenade and I had another, about the size of a beer can. You must remember we had to travel light and not be too heavily weighted down. It was bad enough that we had our weapons and our ammunition and necessities, but we couldn't afford to carry a hell of a lot more climbing up a 100-foot cliff. Anyway, when we pull a pin from the incendiary hand grenade, the compound was exposed to air. It poured out like solder, flowing over the gears, to traverse the gun gears and to elevate the tube or the barrel. These are gears, so I put the solder form that came out of the can over these gears, and it firmed up between the teeth of the various gears like a weld. So it welded these gears together so you couldn't move the guns this way or that way. And I put it in the elevation gears too, so they were welded together so you couldn't up and down the tube. I then silently smashed all 5 guns' sights. I wrapped my field jacket around my gun butt of my submachine gun and went through the 5 of them and smashed their sights, so that was damaging. But I still had 3 guns I hadn't destroyed. So I went back to Jack and I said, listen, let's run back to the roadblock. If we're lucky, we'll get back. And it was only 100 yards, 150 yards away. We were pretty athletic in those days and could run fast. We did. We went back and got more of these hand grenades, thermite grenades, from the guys, and got back without being seen by the Germans or that 75 Germans that were in the field next to us. We got back with those other hand grenades, the thermite grenades, and proceeded to weld up the gears and things for elevation and traversing, and rendered the other 3 big guns absolutely worthless. So therefore we took out the whole 5 guns and made it so they couldn't be used against our troops. Now I'm going to skip a lot of my notes here because I have not much time to tell you all about this. But anyway, with the guns out of action, we sneaked out of that position and got back to our troops, and we had about a 2 or 3 day battle with the Germans to secure our position and nail down the covering of the point and take charge there, which we did. We were relieved at D+2, and I only had I originally had my 22 men, but the rest of the men of our invading force was 225 Rangers. And when we finished the fight 3 days later, 81 of them had been killed. Most of the rest, I forget the figure right now, were walking wounded, and then the rest were so badly wounded they had to be carried out. By the end of the 3 days, we had secured Pointe du Hoc, and all of it, and the regular army came along and relieved us. Is that fast enough, sir? That left you enough time.
Pardon?
That left you enough time.
Fine, fine. Wars often seem so big and so hard to understand, but when you get to a place like Normandy, you can understand that war comes down to the heroic actions of a very few individuals. And you can see why we choose Bud's footsteps to walk in every summer after having heard that story. Our third speaker today, Sam Sandoval, is one of the last remaining Navajo code talkers from World War II. A member of the Zuni clan, he did 5 combat tours in the South Pacific during World War II against the Japanese and holds several medals and awards. In 2000, he was awarded the Congressional Silver Medal. Mr. Sandoval's first landing was on Bougainville, along with Guadalcanal, Palui, Guam, and his last was Okinawa, where his first sign of the Japanese surrender was via the Navajo Code. Mr. Sandoval served with the 297th Platoon of the Marine Corps. The Navajo Code Talkers were featured in the movie Wind Talkers several years ago, which many of you may have seen. At his appearances, Samuel shares some of his World War II experiences with the audience and always tries to place the role of the Navajo Code Talkers into both historical and a social perspective. Samuel Sandoval.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As a Navajo code talker, I would focus in on the landing on 5 islands in the South Pacific. The Navajo code talkers were primarily used in the South Pacific against the Japanese military forces. Being a Navajo code talker, I had 5 combats, and I spent 36 months overseas. Today, recalling the days of my life in the Marine Corps, I am proud to say that I have served as a Navajo code talker and as a Navajo origin of nationality. I'm indebted to the services of the United States Marine Corps. It has been a great experience, some sad, some happy, some in between. But today, looking back at the first assault on Guadalcanal, the beginning of an invasion, there's 2 times that I have served pre-invasion days. That, I mean, maybe 30 to 45 days before the initial assault on these islands. I serve on the ships as a Navajo code talker. And I've seen the softening of each island as I made my tour in the South Pacific. In preparation, we are prepared. We get briefed in as to what beach we are hitting. The beachhead has colored numbers. You have certain color that you have to land. Comes a time that when we land, many never come ashore And we must honor those Marines that never made it to the shore today. In preparation, you are asked at the briefing on board ship, now which one of you Marines or several Marines don't want to get off the ship? And none of them that I have ever experienced seen one. And we are told, if you don't want to go, there's the deep sea there. So that's the orders of the United States Marine Corps. And today, I'm honored to be here to say that I have served my country, United States of America, and that I have served the country of my own, the Navajo Nation. And above all, I like to say, I have helped liberate some of the natives on these islands. Recently, I was back in Guam. Recollection comes. Walk the shores where I landed. Because there's a documentary coming out of the real Navajo code talkers. As I go about my tours throughout the country, throughout the world, people ask me, are you a wind talker? I said, no, I am a code talker. Many of you have seen the Nicolas Cage movie, MGM. Only a brief shot of the real Navajo code talker. Two Indians as actors. One is a Navajo, and the other one is a Canadian Indian. So, a movie is a movie to me. So, while previewing that movie, my wife was sitting by me. As we went along the movie, I said, honey, I don't remember wearing my moccasin in combat. But one thing I like to say about MGM, I give him credit because that movie made a worldwide awareness. There are such people as a Navajo code talker. And there is such people throughout the world. The Navajo code talkers have never been recognized for over 60 years. And that is why I give credit to the Wind Talker movie. Above all, the movie gave us $100,000 for that movie, but I don't have a penny in my pocket. We put it all in scholarship for our Navajo youngsters. And again, back in 1982, a brief mention, President Reagan signed a proclamation that August 14 is the Navajo Kutokis Day, national. How many of you know it? Now you know. Comes next August 14, celebrate with me. My days in the Marine Corps has been a great experience. My great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, an Indian warrior, he lived with us, my mother and father, and he was a warrior, and he was a medicine man. He gave me all the discipline of the traditional life and the culture of the Navajos. Sometimes I regret that I didn't pick it all up. When I entered the Marine Corps, I was caught between two cultures. At an early age of 6, all the language I knew was my own original Navajo language, not a word of English when I started school. At school, I was cautioned. In fact, I was ordered not to talk one word of Navajo while I'm there. It was a boarding school, sponsored by the United Methodist Church, very kind people. Stayed there 9 months out of the year in order not to talk Navajo. And today, I talk Navajo all the time. The code has a very innovative way of explaining it. As a Navajo, the language is very complex. The Navajo language has never been written. The Navajo language does not have military terms. The Navajo language does not have the 26 alphabet like they have in English. The United States Marine Corps started recruiting the Navajos between the ages of 17 and 30 to be fluent in Navajo and to be fluent in English. So I told them I'll be enlisting to the recruiters. I qualified. That's how I entered the Marine Corps, not knowing what I was getting into. And that went on till way after boot camp. In our training at boot camp, we were exposed to every regimen of the training, like all other Marine personnel. Upon entering the advanced training in Camp Pendleton, Camp Pendleton, California, Oceanside. There is where I found out what I was getting into. There were 29 other Navajo boys ahead of me. They were working on the code. The Marine Corps recruited 29, the first group. Then our next group, there was 60 of us, so there was 80. in training. They had completed the alphabet, that's 26. And the 60 that came in after the 29 wasn't so sure about just 26. So we said, let's add on to it. And we did. How did we do it? The Navajo language is different from the Navajo code. We used the Navajo code and took the words of the Navajo language, everyday language. So there's a difference between the everyday language and the Navajo code. Ours was a dictionary that we created ourselves. To begin with, many of these words we never have in everyday language. We develop them through objects, maybe birds, maybe animals that we are familiar with at home. For ships, you don't have but one word in everyday language. For airplane, one word, that's it. And there are numerous planes, and there are numerous ships out there in wartime. So we had to work that out as 17 years old. Today, I only remember half of the code. There were 818 words. And we had to memorize it. We couldn't carry a piece of paper or a dictionary in combat. In combat, we're up there, up front. Initial landing. There were 413 Navajo code talkers trained. Not all of them saw action. Out of that number, maybe 150 were in the thick of it on these islands. Comes a time that we're stuck. Big resistance, even at the beachhead. We have to have some secret messages. The commanding officers of the group, of the unit, would say, New Mexico, that's where I'm from. You send this message back to the ship. We need support on the beach, regardless of the softening up pre-invasion days. They're there. As we work on the land, we use them, the support of the artillery from the big gun, and so forth with the Air Force from above. Sometimes on the line, we need ammunition. We need food. So what do? We have to send all in Navajo code. I had the experience with the code talker that was wounded beside me, and I couldn't help him. I was ordered not to. Let the corpsman take care of it, not you. You got your job. I carried a rifle, field radio, field telephone. So, and I think, and I know today, my biggest weapon was my voice, my tongue. And I have heard people say, ask me, were there other code talkers? Different tribes come out and say, we are code talkers. But to my knowledge, I have never heard one in a combat zone, combat area. Maybe they had it in Europe, maybe they had it in the Army. That I don't know. But ours was a system that we made, that we developed our own system. And in all memory work. And it's confusing. The Japanese Army knows that we are Navajos. But they never could decipher any message that we ever had. And none of the code talkers that were in combat has never been captured. And there were 13 Navajo code talkers killed in action during that war. Upon return to the United States of America, that's another beach that I was happy to come to. Hey, Ray, we're home. Celebration going on. Welcome home. Here comes the code talkers. Look far and wide. Looking for my mom, dad, my brothers and sisters, or any relative. Nowhere to be seen. Why? Because they never got the word. The Navajo Code has been under secrecy for 23 years after the war. It was declassified in 1968, and that was one of the reasons that we were never recognized for years and years. Because of the order of the higher-ups in Washington and the military forces, not to say a word about your duty throughout the Marine Corps life, not even to your comrade, Navajo comrade, who you served with, where you been, what you did. No. And that was the way I lived with it for years. It was so ingrained that I just have to adjust to it that way until declassification of the code. So that is the reason I'm here. Now I can talk. I serve my country. Like I said to begin, I am a citizen of the United States today. During my enlistment, I was told I could not vote. I could not enjoy the liberties of the Constitution of America. what am I doing in the war? What am I doing sacrificing my life? But like I said, I'm very happy and honored to be here today to enjoy all the freedoms that I need to enjoy. I have the freedom of speech, that's why I'm here. I have the freedom of religion, I'm here. And I believe that that's one of my main success as to what World War II has changed the world and my life and my people. And God bless America, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Our fourth speaker today sent in a very short bio to us. In the end, I guess all you really need to see is the medal hanging around his neck. Herschel Woody Williams received the Medal of Honor for his actions on Iwo Jima while serving with 21st Marines, 3rd Marine Division, on February 23, 1945. He was awarded the medal by President Harry S. Truman on October 5, 1945. His citation reads in part, Corporal Williams daringly went forward alone to attempt the reduction of devastating machine gun fire from the unyielding positions. On one occasion, he daringly mounted a pillbox to insert the nozzle of his flamethrower through the air vent, killing the occupants and silencing the gun. On another, he grimly charged enemy riflemen who attempted to stop him with bayonets and destroyed them with a burst of flame from his weapons. Woody Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Professor, it's good to be here. We all enjoyed very much what the Code Talker said, and he said much of what's in each one of our hearts. And it reminded me of a story that Marine Commandant Jim Jones told quite often when he was talking to some of our groups. He was with our Medal of Honor group one time in Washington, and somebody had talked for a considerable amount of time, all interesting, but on a time schedule. So he said that he goes to Quantico. This is his story. He goes to Quantico quite often, and he enjoys going there and talking to these young men who are eventually going to become Marine officers. And he went down there one day, and he said, I may have talked just a little longer than I should. I got kind of wrapped up in what I was talking about, as this man does, because he's speaking from the heart. And he said, as I was talking, one of the candidates for an officer in the back got up and started to walk out. Well, in the Marine Corps, you don't walk out on the commandant for nothing, do you, General? No. He started to walk out, and the commandant said, Candidate, where are you going? And he says, Sir, I'm going to get a haircut. He said, why didn't you get that haircut before you came here? And he said, Sir, I didn't need it then. You know, it is a very small world in which we live, yet it is huge. I walked in here and sat down by this gentleman. I've never seen him before in my life. I was a little leery sitting here by 45, but he didn't threaten me, so I felt safe. But we only spoke for just a few moments, and he asked me where I was from, and I said, West Virginia. And he said, well, I have a very good friend in West Virginia. Couldn't think of the name of the town. I have those senior moments, too. You know, sometimes I can't even remember where I'm from. And then he mentioned the fact that he was on the Bayfield, USS Bayfield. We're going to hear about that in a moment. But this fellow, good friend of mine, lives 4 miles from me. They served together on the Bayfield. His name is Tommy Harbor, my friend is. And Tommy has told me many stories about he and his Bayfield, and unusual because they were Coast Guards people. They were Coast Guards people taking people to shore. That isn't what the Coast Guard's supposed to do. Now, I haven't asked him, I haven't had an opportunity, but Tommy, as an example, hauled people into his beach. And then they turned around and sent them back to the States. Whammy, they sent them to the Pacific, and he hauled people into my beach. So he hauled into his beach and then came to Iwo and hauled people into Iwo. Very unusual and a very small kind of a world. When we landed at Guam, we were on that boat, Higgins boat that has a front on it, like that. And the only way you can get out of that dumb thing is go up to the front and jump over the side. Well, I did that at Guam, and I think the only thought I had was, boy, you make a good target when you're up there on top of that boat. And it would never get to shore far enough to keep you out of the water. It'd just belly out, and you'd have to jump out in the water. Am I right? Right. And I didn't like that a bit. I'm not a good swimmer. In West Virginia, we just have creeks. And you don't swim much in, huh?
I was dry.
You were dry. When we were landing at Iwo Jima, we were told when going up there, we'll probably never get off ship, because nobody ever dreamed that we'd need 70,000 Marines to take that little place. So we were told, you'll never get off ship. We'll just go for a boat ride, and then we'll take you back to Guam. Well, our intelligence then is about as good as it is now. Been there just a few days, and they said, oh, you're going to have to go. Well, they got us up in the wee hours of the morning. Total blackout. That's hard to imagine. Absolute total blackout. You couldn't smoke a cigarette. You couldn't flip a Bic or a Zippo. Nothing lit. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, it's about as dark as it can possibly get. And we go over the side of the ship and down the rope ladder. He went up the rope. I went down the rope. Mine was easier than his. Into a Higgins boat that you really couldn't even see. You just hope that sucker is where you're going to go. We got in that thing, went out, and we were going to go ashore that day, they said. So we got into a circle. 8 or 10 or 12 of these Higgins boats just running around the circle. Water was very rough. Waves were 12, 15 feet high. That thing's out there bobbing like a cork. You're either going that way or you're going this way. I had never been seasick in my life up to that point. Now, I'm not sure whether I got seasick because the boat was bobbing up and down and back and forth, or whether I got sick because some guy behind puked on me. I have a hunch that it was the latter. Everybody was puking. Okay. But you know, you don't have a head on a Higgins boat. Now, for you folk who've never been in the Marine Corps or the Navy, a head is a place where you take care of Mother Nature. There were 36 of us in that thing. No room to sit. Everybody had packs on their back, rifles over their shoulder, and ammunition slung over their shoulders, and all that kind of stuff. No place to sit, so you were standing. Now, we were on there until dark that night. So that meant that we were on that thing for around 12 hours. Now, you can only take care of Mother Nature so long, and she gets mad at you. The only way you could take care of Mother Nature is you had to move around the boat, around the Higgins boat, to where they had the bilge pump. Is that the proper term?
That's it.
That's it. You had to move around. So if this guy back here in this corner facing this direction had to go, everybody had to move in a circle all around the boat until he got to the bilge pump.
Or your helmet.
Well, in the Marine Corps, you would have got, I don't know what they'd have done to you if you'd have used your helmet. I have no idea, but I wasn't about to. But that was the only way you could take care of Mother Nature. When we got to Iwo, well, we went back, loaded back aboard ship that night because there was no room on the beach. There were 40,000 Marines in there and no place to go. So they took us back, put us back aboard ship. We got aboard ship around 11 o'clock. I can very well remember getting aboard, getting up on the deck, top deck, and just keeling over. Never moved until they come to get me off the next morning. They did say that with some of those Navy beans, and if you've never had a Navy bean, you do not want it when you've already been sick. But they did say we had some Navy beans available. So the next morning we get off back in the Higgins boats, out of circling again, and about a little before noon, they finally headed us to the beach. The only thing I remember about hitting that beach was that you couldn't run. When you fell to get below grazing fire or get out of the way of mortars and tried to dig a hole, I'd born and raised on a farm. And I can remember when we would thrash oats, at great big fields of oats. We would thrash oats, and we would put those things in a bin. And we would get in that bin, and it was just almost like BBs. You couldn't dig a hole in it, and that's the way that sand, that's what it reminded me of, trying to dig a hole to get below ground level, and that hole would just keep filling up. You'd dig it out, and the sides would roll in on you. It's just like BBs, or like oats. We finally got to the first airfield. There was no protection above ground on that island until we got somewhere around 1,000, 1,200 yards in. Then there were rocks that you get behind, but you couldn't get under. But on the airfield, the only protection was shell craters. And there were a lot of shell craters because they'd bombed that thing forever. So you'd run from one shell crater to another. And maybe there'd be 6 or 8 people in that same shell crater. That was the only protection. But my experience of landing on that beach, trying to dig my feet in and run, was like almost running in place. But I thank God I made it. Thank you very much. You're up next.
Our last speaker for the day, Marvin Parrott, born on September 17, 1925 in New Orleans. He's a local boy. The adopted son of J.N. and Alice Parrott. He was just 17 years old when he dropped out of Warren Easton High School and presented himself to the Navy recruiter in New Orleans. He was turned down because the recruiter had met his quota for the day. So he turned to the Coast Guard. At the time, Marvin had no idea of the purpose of the Coast Guard. One day before his 18th birthday, though, he raised his right hand and was sworn in as a member of the U.S. Coast Guard. Serving on the USS Bayfield APA-33, an assault troop transport ship where he spent 21 months during the war, it was his job to transport troops to and from shore using the small 36-foot-long Higgins boats. He delivered troops to the beaches of Normandy and Okinawa and witnessed the raising of the American flag on Mount Suribachi and Iwo Jima. He has extensive knowledge and experience in the Coast Guard and Higgins boats and LCVP as an LVCVP coxswain. Marvin.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dang it, that's the way they did it to me at boot camp 63 years ago. I never forgot. Today it's payback time. Now, having said that, about 3 weeks before Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt, since we're getting ready to go to war, and with a stroke of a pen, he pulled the Coast Guard out from under the Treasury Department and placed us under the Navy for the duration of the war. And I respectfully submit that we lost our identity from that day to this, for the simple reason when the Cronkites and the Winchells and so forth would report the news, they would say the Army, Navy, Marines did this, that, or the other. You rarely ever heard him mention the word Coast Guard. Now, I don't take that as a deliberate slight of these respected media personalities of the times. However, in their civilian mind's eye, when they said Navy, they were including the Coast Guard. But the public never got the message. So I've been on a one-man crusade for the past 20 years to educate you people now and forevermore. And one other thing, the Coast Guard was all about assault troop transports, the APAs, the AKAs, the landing craft, the whole 9 yards, amphibious forces. And we did the invasion from day one to the last one, Okinawa, and I was there for that one as well. And you can applaud that if you like. Now, having said that, the day before I turned 18, I presented myself at the Coast Guard office here in New Orleans, and they commenced to process me there. They did all this paperwork and everything. Took a whole day to do it. 5 o'clock that evening, they had me raise my hand. They swore me in as the latest member of the United States Coast Guard. And with that, they handed me a big official brown-looking envelope. I didn't know what it was. So I asked the recruiter, I said, what's this? You know, it's your orders. You know, okay. Well, I said, my what? Your orders, your orders. I said, well, you don't have to yell at me, you know. So anyway, I stepped outside and be at L&N Railroad Station tonight at 10 o'clock and go to St. Augustine, Florida, and commence 6 weeks of boot camp training. I turned out, like, what the? And they said, like, bye. I learned what it meant that day to be shanghaied, because for whatever reason, they wanted me bad. Well, anyway, I presented myself over at St. Augustine, Florida, Ponce de Leon Hotel. Any of y'all ever been to the Ponce de Leon Hotel? You have? Well, let me tell you something. Next time you go, I want you to walk around that beautiful premises and particularly look for any cigarette butts. You're not going to find a one. I know, because they made me pick up every last one of them, and I defied anybody ever do it. Well, anyway, we did 6 weeks there. Then they come out there, and they in the camp, they're saying, man, don't mess up, man. Whatever, don't mess up. We had another word for it. But anyway, what they were saying was, if you went astray or something, you could go to landing barge school. Well, these other kids around from Georgia and Alabama, they didn't know what the heck you were talking. I knew more than I wanted to know about the dang thing, because I saw Mr. Higgins and his people building the boats right here on the streets of New Orleans, testing them on Lake Pontchartrain, hitting the beach. The guys would jump out over the side. They hadn't had the ramp yet. They're jumping out over the side. And I'm saying, I said, a 17-year-old kid, I said, man, I don't want no part of this, you know. But my dumb luck that, because see, I really wanted to join the Navy, because while I didn't mind going overseas, doing my part and all that kind of stuff, I wanted to have some odds in my favor coming back. I had no desire to be left over there, if you get my drift. And on the news and everything, you'd see these ships, I didn't know what they were, but they had cannons, not guns. They had cannons with barrels this big around from here to that wall on the battle wagons and the crew. Man, that's for me. That's what I want. Well, they turned me down, as you just heard. So I wanted to, and with my dumb luck, I wound up driving a 36-foot Higgins landing craft like the one in the Rotunda with 230 caliber machine guns in the back and an Army 45 on my hip. And that's what I had to live with. And by the way, that boat that you see out there in the Rotunda as we speak bears my number. I helped build it, and bears my numbers, PA 33-21, and I'm very proud of that. Now, what happened then, they loaded 150 of us and into 18-wheelers. Nothing like the 18-wheelers you see today where they got heads on there, you know, toilets and TV and the VCR. No, ours had to be swept clean of all the cows and the horse and the pigs that had been hauling a few days before, and a strong odor of Clorox and ammonia and all that stuff. Well, anyway, we board this thing, we go out there and everything. And I got to tell you, by being under the Navy like this from that day forward, everything about the Navy and the Coast Guard was identical. the pay scales, the uniforms, this, that, except for one minor thing. The Coast Guard navy blue uniform, we had slogan of to this day, a simple little white shield on our right sleeve. And I got to tell you, that thing got us in trouble. I'll tell you about that later. Anyway, what happened, we board this 18-wheeler, and here we are, 150 Coast Guard personnel. Where do you think these dumb people brought us? Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, a Marine amphibious training base, then as it is to this day. And when we got there, when we were doing here, they had a bevy of the Higgins landing craft awaiting our arrival. They had Coast Guard personnel there, training us in the use, maintain the upkeep, the whole. And we were there for 6 weeks, Tommy Harbour included. And when we left that base, we were an expert. And I haven't lost my touch. I have a friend of mine that owns the mate to one operational not 40 minutes from New Orleans. And as a matter of fact, there's a screen back there that some folks took of me driving that boat not too many months ago when they were visiting here. So you see yours truly actually driving the boat. So I haven't lost my touch. Now, having said that, we would then go to Little Creek, Virginia, and we'd take possession of 28 to 30 of these landing craft, and then we'd meet up with a ship that came down from New York, a city block long, unprecedented for the times, and it would be a Coast Guard manned assault troop transport, the USS Bayfield. She would be designed to carry 28 to 30 of the landing craft on deck and in the davits, and then below deck in the belly of the beast, there'd be 1,500 troops. To make the invasions. And what would happen is when we were in the Atlantic, it'd be Army personnel. We got to the Pacific, it'd be Marine personnel. And what would happen is from there, we would go to New York, and then in February, we would go over to Glasgow, Scotland. We couldn't wait to go, first foreign port, 18-year-old kid. We couldn't wait because we'd understood the ladies there were very friendly, and so were we. And we had some talents that we wanted to bring over there from the States for the young ladies. The only problem, all these Navy guys want to show and told all the ladies that would listen, don't fool with those guys that shield in their sleeve, because it means they got some kind of a social disease, don't you know? Oh, man, that was terrible. I got to tell you, though, after that, after a few barroom fights, we straightened that out, I got to tell you. and I must confess, the ladies were friendly, and so were we. Okay, now to fast forward this thing, this will take us over here to Plymouth, England. That is going to be our home port abroad, as Norfolk was our home port in the States. And a lot of interesting things happened at Plymouth, England. And there came a time when a certain Rear Admiral, Don Pardee Moon, you'll find his name in the history books today, he came aboard the Bayfield's Navy. And he came aboard the Bayfield as our guest. And for Normandy, that's coming down the pike. And also close on his heels was a certain Major General R.O. Barton, the commanding general of the 4th Infantry Division. He hailed from Augusta, Georgia. And then on his heels was certain Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr. So we had these 3 gentlemen of distinction aboard this Coast Guard manned assault troop transport. And by the Admiral's presence, though Navy and we were a flagship, if you please, at Utah Beach, which means a lot of the Navy ships, Merchant Marine, whatever, would come in to the battle zone of Utah Beach. They got their orders from a Coast Guard ship. Now, okay, having said that, what would happen is on the morning of June 5th, we'd pull out of Plymouth, England, 9 o'clock in the morning. We'd go along the English coastline about to Portsmouth, England, about 150 miles, and he would make a decided right turn down to the Normandy beach here. And in this 150 miles, we would accumulate some 5,000 ships. And young man, listen to this. You take those 5,000 plus ships, and if you would line them up one behind the other, they would have extended a distance of 300 to 350 miles off from New Orleans to Houston, Texas. And I didn't make this up, but a local professor of mathematics at Tulane University gave me that pitch event, but I thought you'd find that of interest. Now, having said that, what would happen is on the morning of June 6th, we arrived at Normandy beachhead area, and at 12 miles offshore, can't say convoy, it was an armada. It split in two. 2,500 of the ships going to lay up off of what's going to be the Utah beachhead. The other 2,500 went downrange 40, 50 miles, and they're going to lay up what's going to be the Omaha beachhead. I was at Utah. I had it easy. They had the tough time because they had to scale a 100-foot cliff. Now, as I'm going in this particular morning, I got 36 troops in this boat. The landing craft is from here, the well part of the boat. You saw it outside. But the well part is only like from here to this end of this curtain right here. And you got these 36 guys, they're in there shoulder to shoulder. And what it is with their 100-pound, 80 or 100-pound packs of gear on their back, they're like starting, they can't even squat down in their own spot. They got in my boat that morning at 2:30 a.m. They didn't put their feet on dry land until about 7 o'clock, okay? HR being, for the first wave, was 6:30 a.m. So anyway, as I'm going in, all these guys are staring me down, and we travel in waves, 10 or 12 boats to a wave. And I'm real busy. I'm 18 and a half years of age, and I got these 36 guys, and they stare me down. And one of them piped and said, "Look, coxswain, we just landed sister in Solano a couple months ago, and the coxswain put us off at about 3 feet away, and we telling you better not do that today." Man, I'm not going to. Now, what? He's standing there with a loaded Thompson submachine gun. He got this, got knives he could shave with, you know. I wasn't going upset, and I didn't know maybe he had what they call battle fatigue. You know? So I didn't want to, but I just assured him I'll give it my best shot, you know, no pun intended. So anyway, that's common. So anyway, I'm going along fine. Everything I got my thing going. I got 4 or 5 boats there, 4 or 5 line abreast. We're getting ready to hit the beach. And there's an Army chaplain standing right in front of me, and a lieutenant, no less. And the poor fellow had a face as white as a sheep. I should have known it. He was seasick. And just like they mentioned before, he's standing there, he can't go anywhere, you know. So, oh, no. I didn't even have time to fill a part. I had coffee and milk, I had eggs. Oh, man, it was a mess. I guess you had to be there. And what happened was my trusty motor Mac that operates the boat trailer type winch for that ramp. There's nothing automatic about it. You got to wind up, and it goes down slam dunk. It's a hunk of iron. Coming up is a different process. So when you see him, he reaches, gets a bucket of seawater, dashes, he turns, "Close your eyes, Molly." You know, I said, "They're already closed. I can't see." You know. So man, he hit me with that. He said, "You want to know?" I said, "Yeah, it was strong medicine." When I said that, all these guys bust out laughing. It was a thing that it took in that moment, in the heat of battle, to relax the tension of time, because none of us knew you'd be living in the next hour or not. So that took care of it. So I must confess, when I went back to the ship now, 12 miles out at sea, like center span of our causeway, total darkness and everything. As I'm going, by now it's getting daylight and everything. But anyway, as I'm going back to the ship, I didn't hurry. Now, you Navy guys can laugh at me for that, but I was smart enough to realize as soon as I get back to the ship, back to the beach again, you know. And I knew I'd done my part. Well, anyway, I go back, my dumb luck, they ordered me to go back to the rear of the vessel. They lowered a vehicle in my boat. The Army called it a weasel. And 2 guys come down. One's a chauffeur and one's a bodyguard. And I asked them, you know, "What's the game?" "Pull up with your lowered gangway. We're going to pick up the boss." I said, "Okay." "Pick up who?" I said, "You find with you." "Okay." I'll pull up there. Dang, there's one soldier. He's standing on the little catwalk from the, and he's poised to jump on the boat. Well, because with these guns, and my 3 men did their job. They caught this guy. But when he bent over like that, it was then that I saw his 2 stars on his shoulder, which told me he was none other than Major General R.O. Barton, the commanding general. And I, Marvin Perret, brought him ashore safely in my New Orleans-made Hayes landing craft band. My number's PA 3321. And then, again, the fast road, I don't want to keep you all day. From there, we would go down and we'd do the invasion. Southern France, we'd come back to Norfolk, Virginia, get a 15-day leave, came here and went back home. With my dumb luck, went back aboard the Bayfield, went through the Panama Canal, and I wound up D-Day at Iwo Jima and Okinawa before it's over for me. And on that note, I can tell you, there's much fanfare going around the country right now, faith of our father, flags of our father, whatever. In Iwo Jima, I saw them raise the flag in person on the 2 or 3 days later when the second flag was raised. Then you can applaud that if you like. And now, having said that, because I know you've been here for a while, I'm just going to simply leave you with the Coast Guard's motto to this day: Semper Paratus, and God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is history. This is heroism. And as you've also heard, this is humanity. I think we all need to thank the World War II Museum for doing everything it's done to collect this history and remember it. Yeah, you could applaud that, as he would say. The 5 veterans on this stage are an important part of that history and an important part of that heroism and an important part of that humanity. But also we're graced with the presence of many other veterans in the audience. I'd like to ask every World War II veteran in this audience to please stand. Don't sit down yet. Because I'm willing to bet, too, that there are other veterans out there of other wars and serving military members out there as well. I'd like them all to stand. They all deserve our thanks for what they've done to our country. Thank you very much.